I'm sitting across from my daughter Sarah at her pristine kitchen table in her McMansion, the kind of house that screams success but whispers emptiness. The granite countertops reflect the harsh LED lighting, making everything feel cold and clinical. At 67, I thought I'd earned the right to dream a little, to voice desires that had been buried under decades of responsibility. I just suggested joining the family trip to Ireland, something I've longed for since Martha died 2 years ago. Then Sarah dropped those words like a blade. "Dad, you're too old to travel with us. You'd slow everyone down with your medications and limitations." The word limitations hung in the air like poison. I felt my chest tighten, not from my heart condition, but from the casual cruelty of it. Here I was, a man who had built a successful accounting practice from nothing, who had raised her with love and sacrifice, being dismissed like a broken-down car that couldn't make the journey. The silence that followed crushed something inside me. Her husband David nodded in agreement, his weak chin bobbing like a marionette, and my grandson Jake couldn't meet my eyes. The boy I'd taught to fish, whose college fund I'd quietly supplemented when David's latest business venture failed, sat there like a stranger. Here's what stung most. I'm not some penniless burden. 43 years as a CPA, building O'Brien Financial Services from a one-room office to a thriving practice, had left me with over $800,000 in savings. But to them, I was just a liability wrapped in aging skin, a reminder of mortality they'd rather not acknowledge. I excused myself quietly, my dignity intact, but my heart shattered. Walking to my car, I noticed how their neighborhood looked. Every house identical, every lawn manicured to suburban perfection, every dream reduced to property values and homeowner association compliance. There it was waiting at home, a certified letter from Dublin, Ireland, sitting on my kitchen counter like fate's calling card. The return address read, O'Sullivan and Associates Solicitors, and something about the elegant letterhead made my hands shake. I poured myself 2 fingers of Martha's favorite Jameson whiskey and stared at our wedding photo on the mantel. Martha's smile beamed back at me, that mischievous grin she wore when planning adventures I'd initially resist, but eventually love. 42 years she encouraged the wandering spirit I'd buried under mortgages, school fees, and crushing responsibility. "Thomas," she used to say, "someday we'll chase sunsets instead of deadlines." But someday never came for her. At midnight, with the whiskey warming my courage and Martha's memory urging me forward, I finally tore open that envelope. That letter changed everything. I was the sole beneficiary of my great-uncle Seamus O'Sullivan's estate, a man I'd exchanged Christmas cards with for decades, but never met face to face. The inheritance included a 200-year-old pub called the Wanderer's Rest in the village of Kilmorran, County Cork, plus associated properties worth an estimated $2.3 million. But there was a catch. I had to travel to Ireland within 45 days to claim it and live there for 90 days to prove I was committed to preserving the family legacy. If I failed, everything would go to the Irish National Heritage Trust. The challenge felt like Seamus reaching from beyond the grave, daring me to finally live the adventure Martha and I had always postponed. I spent 3 days researching Kilmorran online. Population 847, nestled between rolling green hills and dramatic cliffs where ancient Celtic warriors once stood watch. The Wanderer's Rest wasn't just a pub. Built in 1823, it had served as meeting place, courthouse, post office, and sanctuary during various chapters of Irish history. The next morning I woke with clarity I hadn't felt since Martha's death. I called Aer Lingus and booked first class to Dublin, not because I needed luxury, but because I wanted to arrive feeling like the adventure was beginning properly. Then I went shopping for new clothes that reflected the man I wanted to become rather than the widower I'd been. At Nordstrom, I bought wool sweaters in rich greens and blues, sturdy walking boots and a leather jacket that made me feel like the adventurer I'd always wanted to be. I left Sarah a carefully crafted voicemail. "Sarah, I wanted to let you know I'll be traveling for the next few months. Don't worry about this old man slowing anyone down." The satisfaction in my voice was unmistakable. Landing in Dublin after the 8-hour flight, I felt more alive than I had in years. The Irish air smelled different, cleaner, somehow charged with possibility. I checked into the Shelbourne Hotel and called the solicitor. Bridget O'Sullivan answered, her voice carrying the musical lilt that makes Irish English sound like poetry. She was warm but mysterious over the phone. "There's much more to Uncle Seamus's story than the inheritance papers revealed," she said. "He left specific instructions about you, Mr. O'Brien, very specific." The next morning, she picked me up in her Land Rover. Bridget was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked red hair and the kind of confidence that comes from handling life's complexities with grace. The 3-hour journey through Irish countryside was pure magic. Stone walls older than America itself, ancient castles on hilltops, sheep dotting landscapes like scattered clouds. As we drove, Bridget shared stories that brought Seamus to life. He'd been a merchant marine in his youth, sailing the world before settling down to run the pub. He never married, claimed the pub and its patrons were his family, but he'd loved deeply. A local schoolteacher named Moira, who died young of tuberculosis in the 1960s. After her death, he channeled his capacity for love into caring for his community. He used to say that some people are meant to have children, others are meant to have villages. Bridget told me, "Every young person in Kilmoran has a story about Uncle Seamus helping them, paying for school fees, offering jobs, providing counsel when parents couldn't understand their dreams." When we crested the final hill and I saw Kilmoran spread below us, my breath caught. The village was even more beautiful than photos suggested, colourful houses arranged around a perfect harbour where fishing boats bobbed like toys. The Wanderer's Rest stood prominently on the main street, larger than I'd imagined, with a slate roof catching afternoon light and flower boxes bursting with colours I couldn't name. Inside, the pub was everything I'd dreamed an Irish pub should be. Dark wood, gleaming with decades of care, copper fixtures reflecting lamplight like jewels, stone fireplaces promising warmth. The floors were worn smooth by generations of feet, the bar polished to mirror brightness by countless conversations. Behind the bar hung a portrait of Uncle Seamus, painted by a local artist who'd captured something essential about his character. When Bridget handed me the heavy iron keys, their weight was both literal and symbolic. "He left specific instructions," she said formally. "If you're anything like the man he believed you to be, this place will reveal its secrets in due time." My first night overwhelmed me with the pub's aliveness. The manager, Finn Murphy, was a red-bearded giant with gentle manners and encyclopedic knowledge of Irish history. At 35, he'd been running day-to-day operations for 5 years. His wife Siobhan managed the kitchen with skills passed down through generations, and their twin daughters, 8-year-old Molly and Maeve, treated the pub like their extended playground. That first evening, Finn introduced me to the regulars. Old Patrick had been coming for 60 years, his memory a living history of the village. Mary Kate, the storyteller, was perhaps 70, with silver hair in intricate braids and a voice that could make ordinary events sound epic. And young Oif, 19, with red gold hair and dancing freckles, played fiddle like an angel, touched by divine music. They welcomed me warmly, but watched carefully, wondering if this American would honor Seamus's legacy or turn their beloved pub into a tourist trap. I felt the weight of their expectations and hope, understanding I wasn't just inheriting property, I was being entrusted with their gathering place, their heart. That night, alone in Seamus's private quarters, I felt his presence everywhere. His sitting room was lined with books in multiple languages, souvenirs from sailing days, and photographs showing decades of pub life. I discovered his personal journal hidden behind a loose stone, wrapped in oilcloth like treasure. The leather-bound book contained decades of entries, revealing a man who'd lived fully despite never having children, who'd found family and community and purpose in service. But the most recent entries were about me, and they stopped my heart. Seamus had been following my life through our correspondence and careful research, understanding me in ways my own daughter apparently couldn't. One entry, written 6 months before his death, read, "Thomas sends a Christmas card every year, always with personal notes about Martha's garden or his work helping small businesses survive. His handwriting shows character, careful but not rigid, generous loops that speak of kindness held in check by responsibility. I believe he's the one who will understand what this place really means." The final entry. If Thomas is reading this, then the timing is perfect. Adventures delayed are not adventures denied. They're adventures seasoned with wisdom. He spent his life being the responsible one. Now it's time for him to discover what he wants, not what others need from him. I sat in Seamus's chair, overwhelmed by the realization that this stranger had seen me more clearly than people I'd known for decades. He knew about Martha's death and how it had untethered me, about my struggle to find purpose in retirement, about the growing distance between Sarah and me. Life in Kilmoran settled into rhythms I'd never experienced in suburban America. I woke at dawn, not because an alarm demanded it, but because sunrise over Kilmoran Bay was too beautiful to miss. I walked coastal paths that wound along cliffs older than civilization, watching fishing boats head out while seals played in the surf. The physical demands of pub life surprised me. Running the Wanderer's Rest required constant movement, hauling kegs, restocking supplies, cleaning floors worn smooth by generations. My body, soft from years of desk work, began to harden and strengthen. The mild aches I'd attributed to age disappeared as I became more active. The regulars included me in their daily routines. Old Patrick appointed himself my tutor in local history, sharing stories stretching back to famine years. Mary Kate became my guide to Irish culture, patiently explaining everything from appreciating traditional music to the social rules governing pub conversation. But it was young Eowulf who became my most unexpected teacher. When she learned I had musical background, I'd played piano as a child and regretted giving it up. She began teaching me Irish traditional tunes on Seamus's old bodhrán drum. "Music is the heartbeat of Ireland," she told me during practice sessions. "Uncle Seamus said you can't understand this country until you feel its rhythm in your bones. Every tune tells a story, every rhythm carries memory." I also found unexpected friendship with Dr. Mairead Collins, the village physician. Around my age and recently widowed, she understood the disorientation of starting over in life's second half. Her husband had been a maritime archaeologist who died suddenly 2 years earlier, leaving her with a successful practice, but an empty house. Through Mairead, I learned about Seamus's quiet generosity. He'd paid for Aif's university tuition, helped Finn's family during illness, and anonymously supported elderly residents too proud to ask for help. The pub wasn't just business. It was the center of a community support system operating on love rather than obligation. He told me once that family isn't just blood, Mairead explained as we watched sunset paint the bay. It's people who choose to care for each other. That's what Kilmoran is, a family bound by choice. And now you're part of that family. 6 weeks into my stay, Sarah called in tears. Her carefully constructed life was crumbling. David's business hadn't just failed, it had collapsed spectacularly, leaving them with debts threatening everything. They were facing foreclosure, and her comfortable lifestyle was dissolving like sugar in rain. "Dad, I'm scared," she sobbed. "Everything's falling apart." But she'd also been researching my little vacation and discovered property records showing the Wanderer's Rest's value. I could hear calculation creeping into her distress. "Dad, I found out about your inheritance. Why didn't you tell me?" The hurt in her voice was real, but so was the desperate hope that my fortune could solve her problems. She wanted to fly to Ireland immediately to help me make decisions about the property. "Sarah, remember when you said I was too old to travel with you? That I'd slow you down?" Silence stretched across the Atlantic connection. "Well, I'm not slowing anyone down here. In fact, I'm thinking of staying permanently." Her panic was palpable. "Dad, you can't make major life decisions like this alone. You're not thinking clearly. You need family around you for important choices." It was the same condescending tone. Her concern wasn't about my well-being, it was about her financial security. She dismissed me when inconvenient and now wanted to manage me when potentially useful. "I'll think about it, Sarah. Maybe you could visit after your foreclosure proceedings are settled." The line went quiet. I'd never spoken to her this directly before. For 43 years, I'd been the diplomatic accountant who helped solve problems without confrontation. But Ireland was teaching me that sometimes honesty is the kindest gift. "I'm booking a flight," she said finally, mixing desperation with determination. Sarah arrived in Cork 3 days later, looking harried and desperate. She'd expected to find me confused and possibly manipulated by clever Irish lawyers. Instead, she found me tanned from daily walks, fit from pub work, and completely at home in the Wanderer's Rest. I was behind the bar when she walked in, pulling pints for the early evening crowd, laughing at Patrick's latest story. I wore an Irish wool sweater Mayred had helped me pick out. My hair was longer and wilder than it had been in decades, and I moved through the pub with complete confidence. The shock on her face was unmistakable. This wasn't the diminished widower she'd left behind, the man she'd dismissed as too old for adventure. I was transformed, not just in appearance but in presence. There was energy in my movements, joy in my laughter, purpose in my actions. "Dad!" Her voice was small, uncertain, tinged with disbelief. The pub went quiet as I introduced her, and I watched her struggle to process what she was seeing. Finn greeted her with Irish warmth. Oif played a welcome tune. The regulars were genuinely pleased to meet Tom's daughter from America. But I also watched Sarah calculate, her marketing mind automatically assessing the pub's value and potential. That night, after the pub closed, we sat by the fireplace in Seamus's sitting room. Sarah tried to take control immediately, pulling out printed materials about senior living communities, Medicare advantages, and the importance of proximity to family during declining years. "Dad, you can't possibly want to spend your final years in this quaint place," she said, the word quaint dripping with barely concealed disdain. "Sarah, what if these aren't my final years? What if they're my beginning years?" She stared at me as if I'd announced plans to become an astronaut. "Dad, you're 67. You have maybe 15 good years left if you're lucky. Don't waste them playing Irish publican when you could be comfortable and safe in America." Her words revealed everything. She saw my life as winding down rather than opening up, my age as limitation rather than asset. She couldn't imagine that at 67 I might be discovering rather than surrendering. The next morning, over breakfast overlooking Kilmaran Bay, Sarah tried emotional manipulation. She talked about grandchildren who missed me. Though we both knew Jake barely acknowledged my existence, she mentioned family traditions being broken, though our traditions consisted of obligatory holiday visits filled with awkward conversation. But then David called, his voice loud enough for me to hear through her phone, and her facade cracked. The foreclosure was proceeding faster than expected. They needed money in weeks, not months. Sarah's desperation became naked, impossible to disguise. "Dad, I need you to sell this place. We're going to lose everything." Finally, the truth. Not concern for my welfare, not family togetherness, just money. The practical need for her aging father to sacrifice his happiness for her financial salvation. Under my gentle but persistent questioning, skills learned from helping clients face financial realities, the real story of her marriage emerged. David was a serial business failure who'd convinced her to mortgage their future repeatedly. She worked 60-hour weeks, not because she loved it, but to support his dreams and maintain their expensive lifestyle. Their marriage had become a business arrangement with little intimacy remaining. "I used to dream about traveling," she admitted quietly, staring toward the horizon. "Before David, before house payments, before everything became about image. I wanted to see the world, maybe write travel articles. I thought about joining Peace Corps or teaching English in exotic countries. But those were childish dreams." Were they? Or were they dreams you abandoned to please people who couldn't see past conventional success? She looked at me with vulnerability I hadn't seen in years. For a moment, she wasn't the controlling daughter managing her aging father's decline, but the young woman who'd once planned adventures and imagined a life less ordinary. "I'm scared, Dad. If we lose the house, everyone will know we've failed. I don't know who I am without the lifestyle we've created." "Sarah, what if failure is just life redirecting you towards something better? What if losing what you thought you wanted gives you the chance to discover what you actually need?" That evening, Sarah experienced the Wanderer's Rest at its magical best during a traditional music session, the pub filled with locals and tourists drawn by Oif's transcendent fiddle playing, creating community bound by joy rather than obligation. I watched Sarah witness something completely foreign to her suburban experience, people choosing each other's company without agenda or expectation of return on investment. When Oif dedicated a song to Tom the American and his daughter from across the sea, tears filled Sarah's eyes for the first time since she'd arrived. The music ranged from haunting laments to reels that had everyone clapping. Old Patrick sang in Irish, his cracked but steady voice carrying centuries of memory. Sarah sat nursing wine, watching with anthropologists' fascination. She saw couples married for decades, still choosing to spend evenings together because they wanted to, witnessed strangers becoming friends over shared musical appreciation, observed sophisticated social dynamics that couldn't be manufactured. "This is what community actually looks like," she whispered. I'd forgotten such places existed. After the session, we walked the moonlit coastal path along cliffs where ancient peoples had watched for sea invaders. The ocean stretched endlessly, silver-capped waves catching moonlight. The profound silence was impossible to find in suburban America. "Dad, I owe you an apology," Sarah said finally. "Not just for saying you were too old to travel, but for never seeing who you really are." "Who am I, Sarah?" She chose words carefully. "You're someone who builds communities wherever you go. In America, you helped small businesses thrive. You and Mom created a home neighbors loved visiting. Here, you've become part of something beautiful in just 2 months. I've been so focused on what you couldn't do that I never saw what you were capable of becoming. I'm staying in Ireland permanently, Sarah. This life is exactly what I want for however many years I have left." She nodded, not surprised, but perhaps understanding for the first time. "I can see why, and I'm happy for you, truly. But I'm also terrified about what happens to us. Sarah, I want to help you, not by sacrificing my happiness to solve your problems, but by sharing my good fortune in a way that might help you discover your own strength." Over the next hour, sitting on that clifftop bench, I explained my plan. I would loan her enough to prevent foreclosure and stabilize her situation, but with conditions. She had to establish clear boundaries around David's influence and their finances. She needed to pursue fulfilling work, even if it meant temporary income reduction. Most importantly, she had to commit to rebuilding our relationship based on honesty. I'll help fund the grandchildren's college educations, but they'll need to earn it through achievement and growth. I'll support your career transition, but you need courage to pursue work matching your talents rather than just maintaining lifestyle expectations. I also proposed annual summer visits to Ireland, bringing the children to understand their heritage, but they'll come as guests, not inheritors. This place will teach them about community and resilience they can't learn in suburban America. Why would you do all that after how I've treated you? Because you're my daughter, and Uncle Seamus taught me something important. Family isn't about obligation or guilt. It's about love. And love means wanting people you care about to become their best selves, even when they've disappointed you. During her 3-week visit, Sarah transformed. Away from David's influence and lifestyle pressure, she relaxed in ways I hadn't seen since college. She helped in the pub, learning traditional Irish dishes from Siobhan and discovering natural talent for hospitality. She spent hours with Mairead learning Irish history and developed real friendship with Áoimh, despite their age difference. Most surprisingly, Sarah began writing again, something abandoned since college journalism classes. She started with observations about Irish village life, but gradually developed complex pieces about differences between American and Irish approaches to community and success. Her writing had a voice I'd never heard. Thoughtful, honest, sometimes humorous, always human. On her last night, the Wanderers rest through an impromptu farewell party that evolved naturally as word spread. Patrick told stories about his children who'd emigrated to America, Mary-Kate shared traditional travel blessings, and Áoimh played Sarah's favorite tunes. The moment that moved me most came when reserved Finn raised his glass. To Sarah, who came to Ireland as Tom's daughter, but leaves as our friend. May the road rise up to meet you, and may you find courage for the journey ahead. And the entire pub joined the toast, and I watched Sarah realize she'd become part of this community. These weren't just polite gestures, they genuinely cared about her welfare and future. 6 months later, as I write in my journal, Seamus's journal becoming mine through daily use, Sarah's transformation continues across the Atlantic. She did leave David through patient establishment of independence rather than dramatic confrontation. The divorce wasn't bitter. They both seemed relieved to stop pretending. She took a position with a travel magazine, initially covering domestic destinations, but building toward international assignments. Her first major piece was about Americans discovering new lives abroad, interviewing me extensively about my Irish experience. The article was beautiful and honest, capturing both challenges and rewards of starting over in life's second half. Jake, my grandson, surprised everyone by asking to spend his gap year working at the Wanderers Rest. His letter moved me. Grandpa, Mum says you proved that getting older doesn't mean settling for less. She says you're the bravest person she knows, and I want to learn what courage looks like. Jake arrived in September, a typical American teenager gradually adapting to Irish community life's intensity. Finn took him under his wing, teaching everything from pulling pints to understanding pub conversation dynamics. By Christmas, he was speaking with Irish accent traces and planning to study hospitality management at University College Cork. Emma, my granddaughter, visited for summer holidays and fell in love with Áoimh's fiddle playing. Now she's taking traditional Irish music lessons in Florida and planning her own gap year in Ireland. Sarah encourages these connections, understanding that heritage is gift rather than burden. The pub continues thriving under my stewardship, evolved with cultural programming, Irish language classes, traditional craft workshops, storytelling sessions blending history with contemporary experience. We've attracted several young families working remotely who want to raise children in real community rather than suburban isolation. Mairead and I developed friendship into something deeper and more complex, neither rushing toward remarriage nor trying to recreate what we had with deceased spouses, but we've found companionship enriching both our lives. We travel together to archaeological sites. She helps with pub programming. I assist with her community health initiatives. Old Patrick celebrated his 80th birthday last month with a 3-day party drawing relatives from across Ireland and America. Mary Kate has begun writing down stories she's carried for decades, creating village history capturing both facts and folklore. Awife graduated with honours and has been accepted for master's studies at Trinity College, Dublin, funded partly by a scholarship I quietly established in Seamus's memory. Tonight, as I close the pub and climb to my quarters, I pause at Seamus's portrait as I do every evening. At 68, my life has never been more full of possibility rather than limitation. Adventure isn't about age or physical capability, it's about courage. Courage to disappoint people wanting to keep you small. Courage to risk failure pursuing authentic happiness. Courage to discover who you might become if you stop accepting who others think you should be. And courage, like good Irish whiskey, only improves with time. It develops complexity and potency younger versions lack. At 68, I have courage, seasoned by experience, tempered by loss, and freed from the need for approval that constrains younger people. Martha would be proud, not because I've remained frozen in grief, but because I've honored our love by continuing to grow. The Wanderer's Rest became the place where Thomas O'Brien finally learned to be fully himself. Braver, kinder, more capable and joyful than I ever imagined possible. Tomorrow brings new adventures. Sarah returns for her annual visit, bringing Emma and a young man she describes as actually worthy of my time. Jake returns from university full of expansion plans for the pub's cultural programming. Mairead and I are planning a Scottish trip exploring her genealogy and my growing interest in Celtic history. The Irish say, "Is fear mal nariam," better late than never. But I've learned something better. Sometimes late is exactly the right time, when wisdom has seasoned courage and experience has taught you to value authenticity over approval. I raise a final glass of Jameson to Seamus's portrait, to Martha's memory, to Sarah's transformation, and to whatever adventures tomorrow brings. At 68, I'm not ending anything, I'm just getting started. Slaint. I hope you enjoyed today's story here on the Grey Revenge channel. If you did, then please like, share, and tell us your own story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Help us grow as a storytelling community and be part of this with us. Can I count on you? Thank you so much.